And we're live. What's up, everybody? Good
Are we?
morning. I think so. It says this meeting is being live streamed,
All
so we
right,
must be
nice.
Looks like
live.
we're live, yeah.
Oh, okay, we are now. Yeah. All right.
Hello. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Saturday morning live stream with Code Noobs. Hey, Randall. Hey, Danny. How you guys doing this morning?
What's up?
What
Doing
up?
well, man.
Got my coffee,
Ooh, me
ready to
too.
chat
Look,
about
I
AI
have
and
I have iced coffee. Look, I'm doing the influencer thing. Check this out.
oh, look at mine.
Yeah.
Wait, why are you doing that? So they can see it?
So
That's what they
yeah,
do.
I don't know. So they focus on it. I don't know.
Yeah. So it
I don't
doesn't
know how
get
that
like
works.
they do a I
Yeah.
mean, I give them they do a pretty good job of making things like besides the person not visible in the screen.
Yeah, yeah. You
For like
just
real
need a
time.
live green screen.
Yeah.
hmm
It's pretty crazy. How you guys doing this week? What's new? You've been
Good.
coding, you've been not coding, you've been vibe coding.
I was
Anything?
Been
I vibed a little.
just
I've been playing some video games too, relaxing. Sorry. Yeah.
Nice.
mm, that's the good stuff. Yeah, I've been waiting for some new video games to come out October 10th. Anyone who can guess what comes out then, good game
There's
for me.
nothing lazier than not playing video games, but just waiting for video games to come out.
Just sitting there with the
Yeah,
controller in my
it's
hand and like I'm
and
ready.
pure anticipation.
I'm
Yep.
really, really ready for this. It's gonna be awesome.
Yeah. Yeah,
Very
but
nice, very nice.
I'm actually back into studying for the hardest hacking certification and
Ah, sweet.
yeah, giving myself a bit more time because I've always been in the philosophy that I can learn anything on a long enough time period. But
Mm,
the last time I just didn't have enough time to study for it. So this time have a whole year, have the materials, resources, and have a lot more experience now. So this time
Dude, I
going
think
full
you'll
very
throttle.
rock it
nice.
this time, I think. And you get two attempts, you
Yeah.
said, right?
Oh
But I
yeah,
think
true.
that,
Two attempts.
it's nice though too, because I think stuff like that, like we forget how much that does motivate us though too, to like actually stick to something when you have a goal like that, and
Yeah.
actually complete it. So
Yeah.
it makes a huge
And
difference.
then so just yes, because we're just talking off topic before we get into things. But so like we always talk about how applying for jobs is the dumbest way to go about getting jobs. And so
Hmm.
like the other day I was just walking around the shopping complex and there was a dude wearing a hat that said cybersecurity on it. So instead of walk by him, I just walked up to him, spoke to him. He's been in the industry for like 30, 40 years and
He's wearing a hat that says it. He better
yeah.
be.
But I know, right? But like I was just talking with him and he wanted to know all about what I do and where I'm at and everything. And he's like, "Man, I wish that I met you like 20 years ago when I still had my consultancy because I would have hired you on the spot." And
Mm,
what that just says to me like what we always preach on this channel all the time that it's not about applying for these jobs that don't exist or that have already been filled. It's really about
yeah.
networking and finding the people because you know, sure, the timing wasn't great. He's already retired, but had it have been at that time, and I'm sure the next time it'll be something like that, I would have walked out of there with a job and wouldn't have even had to apply.
Well, you know what, dude? To that point too, like I was actually looking on LinkedIn this week because I was just curious. I was trying to see what was like in the area in terms of business and stuff, because to do some outreach if I wanted to later. And every time I'm on there, if I find something, I'll go to the company website. I never do anything and what you end up finding if you do that, you'll find out that like 90% of them are scams. They're not real.
Hmm.
They don't, it's like it's
hmm
some other person that's not even at the company that made up a thing that looks like it. It's like it's insane. And they don't care because
Which
the only
is,
thing gets paid.
it's actually a really good point. So I listened to this book called 48 Days to the Work You Love, and it's actually a really great book for how to apply for jobs because it tells you, I mean, it tells you that among other things, how like most of the job postings are ghost jobs because HR needs to do it
Yeah.
so they can hire someone internally and not be like
Yeah.
persecuted for nepotism. And they just, like you mentioned, they do all to just to grab all these other things, but it gives you a methodology for actually applying for jobs at companies you want to work for and getting those jobs. So anyone who's looking for a job and may have difficulty with the job hiring process, check out 48 Days to the Work You Love.
It's a good idea.
Hmm. Yeah, it's
Check that
good.
out.
Very
Yeah, it
cool.
is hard though.
Yeah. Well, today we have, I think, a pretty interesting topic about basically, does AI change what it means to be a developer? Because I think, this goes right along with what you're saying of trying to find a job. If you're out there, uh, trying to become a developer. What are you laughing at?
I was
What are
just,
you
I was just thinking,
laughing
and we're only going to give one word answers.
at?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
you first. It's going to be our
Yes.
shortest live stream ever.
Yes.
I know, I always get
Yeah.
giggling when I do stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, so like, I mean, if you are out there trying to get a job as a developer, I think now more than ever, you kind of have to be aware of what that means, right? Because before it was just simple, like you could be like, I'm a front end developer, I'm a back end developer, I use this tech stack. But now AI is kind of thrown into the loop and makes almost anyone able to work as a developer in almost any space, right? Like we talk about vibe coding a lot, and Chris Graves and I actually did a video the other day about the difference between vibe coding and context engineering. And I thought it was interesting because basically, we were discussing how vibe coding can only really get you so far, right? You can
Yeah,
only
dude,
build like
totally.
simple apps with it. And so now there's sort of this whole new realm of development where you have to learn how to engineer context. Like, what does the AI understand about your app? And also, like, I think prompt engineering in general is just a much needed skill where, anybody now can go on and be like, build me a to-do list app, but it's very difficult for people to engineer prompts that get complex apps built or even complex features built.
No, I think
So,
context, I think that's true. Like context engineering and prompt engineering is like crucial. I think also too though, like
yeah.
if you really want to do this, like do development and not just like pretend, I guess. Like AI is so powerful. You like it's amazing that you can pick up anything now. Like you can pick up any tech stack, it doesn't matter, because basically it can do most of the heavy lifting for you. And I think really as developers too, like I was thinking about this a lot in the last couple of weeks, because I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, but we took a break. The it's like you need to understand now the larger picture, I think, more than anything. Like understand how to design stuff, understand the actual architecture
Mhm.
involved, understand like what is, because I noticed that myself, like using these tools, like if you know what you want, if you understand like this is what I want my database schema to look like, this is how I want to connect things, you'll get really good results. If you don't know
Yeah.
what you want, you'll have tons of problems because as you keep progressing, it'll keep making decisions for you that may or may not actually align with what you want ultimately and what the goal is for the next like phases of features and stuff. And that's a pain when you have to like
Yeah.
change everything.
Uh, Yeah, I joined this Vibe Coding is Life, I think it's called, Facebook group. And I thought it would be a lot of like developers in there who are building, but it's a lot of people who are non-developers who are just interested in vibe coding because they're like, um, it's like a new way that non-technical people can get
Dude,
involved in building
it
software.
like opened up the computer for a lot of people, I think, because if you
Yeah.
think about it, it's an opaque, it was a really opaque before. Now it's like that's really accessible before in a way that's never been. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, and it was interesting to me because I've been in this group for a while, and there's a lot of really cool stuff in there, like in terms of what people are building, but then also there's a lot of, non-technical people who don't want to learn anything. They just want to one-shot prompt everything, and they consistently you see people who just struggle because they try to one-shot stuff and they're like, this doesn't work, or they have no clue about like the tech stack. So
Well, that's the
it's
other,
an
that's a
yeah.
good misconception though, right? It's like I think we think AI is so powerful, and it is powerful, right? So in our heads, we know it's powerful, but then we expect it to make the whole thing from like one prompt, even if it's a well-crafted prompt. Dude,
Mhm.
the reality is, like from nothing to production, it's still going to take a couple weeks. Now, granted, before that, that
Yeah.
would have taken you maybe months or years to build, so it's way faster, but it's still going to
Yeah.
take time. It's going to take a lot of iteration. And I think too, that's the other thing people don't realize is doing things in phases is a lot better too, like in steps, knowing like how to break up a project into like, front end UI and this and that. And like, so you're actually getting something built that works well overall.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've seen different philosophies around that in terms of like how to build. Like some people prefer building, you know, the overall image, like the overall idea, and then the back end first, so they understand the data structure, and then the front end. I personally think it makes more sense sort of the other way.
I always
Um,
prefer actually doing the UI first and then connecting
yeah,
it. Yeah.
but it does kind of make sense if like, you're iterating on a software, where like the UI might change over time to kind of work through the back end first.
I
I
guess if
think
you don't
it's personal
understand it too
preference.
at all either, if you have no knowledge of it, doing it that way, you get a better understanding of what's going on in the background before you even
Yeah,
start the front. Maybe that makes sense, I guess. Yeah.
yeah. Do you think that like AI is going to change like cybersecurity too? Like as a cybersecurity expert, like how do you think that's uh, going
Yeah,
to affect the field?
so there's speculation from some of the top people in the field that all of the kind of grunt work cybersecurity stuff that employs
Mm,
most cybersecurity people will be completely done by AI in about 5 years. So most of that would be like penetration testing, which is where
hmm.
a company, just to make sure that their online presence or their app or whatever is secure, they'll hire a company to go through it. And it makes sense because a lot of that is just automation. So like finding a way to automate it properly. And even nowadays, a
Yeah.
lot of the best tools have integrated AI with them. So like Burp Suite, which is one of the best tools for looking at web apps, it has its own Burp AI now. So it has
Oh,
AI already integrated into it. Yeah.
And what
And
does
so
that do? Like, is that like actually trying to find vulnerabilities, or is it
it kind of like makes you a better uh, penetration tester. So basically, you'll just run scans, which Burp Suite did before. It runs scans, and
Mhm.
but then once the scans come in, it'll have all the results, and you can have with that you can go through it with AI, and it'll tell you what stuff to maybe look at if there's stuff you're
Okay.
curious about, because like that the results that you get have copious amounts of information, and so like
Yeah.
and it's so easy to not read every line just to kind of glance over it. And so
Mm.
especially with stuff that you might not know about or you might not have heard of, you'll be like, "Oh yeah, I'll look at that later," but then you forget to look at it later. But with the AI, you
Mm.
can just click on it and click explore and it'll
It'll be
not
like,
only
hey, this is
it's
it'll
this
not
is
only
edgy.
tell you
vulnerable.
well, it'll not only tell you about it, but it'll actually automate tests against it. So it'll run
Wow.
tests against the web app to see if it's vulnerable to anything. So it does
See,
kind of level up your skill as a web penetration tester.
That's cool though, because it
yeah.
does. It's kind of similar. I mean, it's similar, I think, how it's used too. It like levels up your ability. You can start doing more than you could before, much faster, right? It makes you, I think this is the issue, right? Is like if you use these well, anybody can be at least mid-level right off the bat almost, right? Like
Yeah.
if you take the time to learn some stuff and know what you're doing, yeah, it's kind of
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. But
When
to
you first started saying that, you made me think of like it might be cool to integrate like an AI sort of like screen recorder that can do, because you have to write a lot of like reports for cybersecurity, right? So like if you could have like a screen recorder that just records what you do and writes all those reports, that'd be kind of cool.
You know, they
that
do
would be
well.
awesome.
You could do something like what Copilot does with the history search, right? Take a screenshot every few seconds and then go
Yeah.
back through them, right? And be able to track what you did. No, that'd be awesome. Yeah. We have a couple
Mhm.
comments. LaPointe said that he's been doing a lot of reading and listening to the obstacle is the way and thinking about high level planning for AI
Mm.
orchestration and then relaxing with his PlayStation controller. But
Nice.
I think this is the other thing.
Sleeping in
Yeah.
bed at night with it.
But it gives us more time, I think, to do other things and think about the project rather than actually coding, because that took up so much time before. Now you can like knock these things out. And
Yeah.
is Sly's analog, is that Charles? Or not?
I
I
think
can't
it's
remember.
David.
No.
Dave, okay. Yeah. Well, what's up? He
Yeah.
says he's been having to redirect his chats and cursor on a website that he's been working on because it keeps wanting to go the wrong direction than what he wanted. And that's what you're talking about,
Mm.
context engineering and prompt engineering, right? Which is, I
Yeah.
think having those and precursor is cool because it does that, right? Having all those documents there beforehand, so you have some sort of like source of truth, so that when you're
Yeah.
trying to prompt it, you know that you're going to get at least, or most of the time, you're going to get results that are at least tailored to what you want.
Yeah. I think some of the other things, definitely like having, development documentation to guide your AI is very important, so that it knows like what tech stack it's using. Some of the other things that you can do with Cursor is like use cursor rules to define a tech stack if you see that it keeps like trying to do something else. The other thing is, and this only works for so long, but you can choose a specific model, and some of them are much better than others. Like
And also
the
too, I think switching between them sometimes is a good idea too. Like if you're
yeah,
getting bad results from one, switch to a different model. I do that all the time now. I never run an auto. I always select a model that I'm using. Usually I think Claude Sonnet's awesome. Like that one's been kicking it. So
yeah.
yeah.
But one of the things, like just for David and anybody else who's listening, one of the things that I do that actually helps quite a bit is I just build one basic cursor rule that defines like how the agent is allowed to act. So when I basically the rule says sort of like the workshopping prompt that we've talked about a couple times before, but essentially it's saying a couple things. It's like when I give you a prompt, you can't just go and do that. You have to actually build like you have to define the problem and the solution, build a checklist, ask me any clarifying questions that you may have, and then ask me for permission before proceeding. And that tends to help with the AI just going off in a random direction because a lot of times we have this like assumption about what we want in our head, but we can't write that down
Yeah.
very easily. And so we write a simpler version of that, and then we just assume the AI is going to understand like exactly what we want. And so if you ask it to actually ask you clarifying questions, you're going to see that it a lot of times, like this was kind of mind blowing to me, is that a lot of times it doesn't have all the information and it'll just be like, oh, well, I'll just go do it anyway.
Yeah.
Right. And so you'll see when you ask it to ask you questions, it asks really, really good questions about, different things like what color do you want? What tech stack? What package should I install for this? And it just sets up some guardrails so that AI doesn't do that. Because I think that's one of the things that I see frequently and why a lot of code just turns into spaghetti. Like I've seen that on the vibe coding Facebook
Well,
group too, where it just
that's the
happens.
that's the other thing too, is like I think that people forget is if you don't know what you're doing, like say a Next.js app, right? You'll start if you just vibe code it, it'll put everything on like page and like layout
Mhm.
and no
Mhm.
components, no best practices or
Yeah.
anything. And so you have to tell it that. And like LaPointe just said too, he said like developer documentation without ambiguity is like the ultimate goal, right? And I think that is.
Yes.
And it's funny, like, and there's lots of different techniques you can use, like focusing on small tasks, I think does work really well. Having in the rules that it's going to use like component architecture and like that it's going to use reusable for better maintenance later on really works
Hmm.
well. I've done that a lot now because I always do that because otherwise it does, it
Yeah.
puts everything in one place. And,
Yep.
it gets impossible to go through and edit and update later. It gets really hard. The other thing I actually found,
Yeah.
it's been working really well for me too. It's funny for design because I just tried it. I was working on just a little side project for myself, a website for my photography, just like display photos and
Hmm.
stuff. And I wasn't getting good results. And then I basically just went into Canva and I just used boxes to define the layout. That's it. Nothing, not
Mm.
fancy. It was super simple. Dude, it worked awesome. It did.
Interesting. So you
That's
just uploaded a picture
I just
to
took,
a
yeah, I
cursor?
just basically went in Canva and I just used little boxes that were different colors and put like nav, image,
Mm.
about section. That's it. And then it did an awesome job. I think simple
Interesting.
actually worked better in that context. It was really
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, it worked really well. And then I just told it, I said, like in the nav bar, here's the navigation things I want, the items,
Yeah.
and so I just filled in some information, but overall I used a very simple layout and it worked like a very simple wireframe was all it was.
That's very cool.
Yeah, it worked really
Yeah,
well.
I did something yesterday that I thought was kind of interesting where I was trying to like build uh essentially the styles for a website. And so I just workshopped in Cursor where I was like explaining because I didn't have it defined yet. I wanted to like sort of use Cursor to help me figure out what styles I wanted. So I just workshopped with Cursor like back and forth, and I said, "Hey, build me a page in Next and start just like displaying the
Oh,
styles
that's a good
for me."
idea. Yeah.
And so it built like a really nice page that was like, these are text styles, these are like the card styles, this is like the background colors. And then as it was doing it, I was having it update the globals.css with those styles. And then I could literally just pick out like, hey, this one I want to change this way. And it would change both the demo page so I could see it in real time, and then also change the globals to see, to update it for that.
Well, I think that's
Um,
what's cool, dude, is this is like a new area, right? So it's like you have to just, and I find that a lot. It's like it's just like messing around with it and trying things out. You get better results by just experimenting over and over again. And I think that's a
yeah,
really cool idea. I like that though. Having it show you is really smart because then you can just kind of go through it.
yeah,
I do that a lot with like actual stuff that I'm working on, but that's cool to do ahead of time. I like that idea. That works really
yeah.
well.
Because then like you can get I think it might be worthwhile to do that with. It's a little bit hard because as you're building like a UI, you build new components, you have ideas for things. You're like, oh, I want to use a badge here or whatever. But like you can get a pretty basic understanding of certain things. If you go on like Daisy UI or something and you're like, here's all the components, like add these styles to them, or ShadCN and be like, build these ShadCN components and just tell Cursor like, I want to use this component, like the card component or a button component, and then just have it iterate on like a demo page so that you can just see all the styles in one place. Because one of the things, I mean, that might be a useful way to even prompt with it. Because one of the things that I've seen frequently is like when you're building a larger complex project and you prompt Cursor, it'll just go and like, if you don't instruct it sometimes it'll just build like a new type of card instead of
Oh, they
being like,
all
hey,
will. Yeah.
use the
Yeah.
card that I already have, like the card component.
Well,
It'll just be like, oh yeah, I'll just make a whole new one for
that's
you. Here
another
you
good
go.
point though, right? Is like whenever you're prompting too is tag context of pages or
Mm,
components in your project that
mhm.
are similar to what you want. Because most of the time you're reusing stuff or you want a similar look, right? So like that's what I usually do. Like if I have my homepage done, say, and then I want to build it in Bow, I just tag the homepage as context and say, make this, this should look styled like this page. And then, following the rules and stuff that you already have in place, that seems to help a lot. But I think this
Yeah,
is the cool thing. It's like, dude, just testing these things out. And I think you make a good point too, is that AI is really powerful and chatting with it can be such a good way to plan a project and figure out how you're going to
yeah.
actually set it up, what you're going to use and how you're going to, and it'll actually explain everything to you. Like I've done some stuff that I
Yeah.
had never done before by just using AI and following their instructions on how to do it. Like I'll be like, well, I like a good example is in the Modibot project I was building. I wanted to automate something on the back end. And I was like, what are three good ways to go about doing this? And which one do you
Mm-hmm.
think is the best and why? It gave me that list. Then it told
Mm-hmm.
me that. I looked at all of them and I chose one. And then I was like, all right, walk me through how to do this and set it up and test it. And then we did all of that. And it was step by step, super easy. And I did it myself
Yeah.
because I wanted to actually like remember it. So I typed it all out. But like, yeah, it was
Nice.
super helpful. It was cool.
Yeah, I do that pretty frequently. I'm curious, David, or I think it's Sly. In what way was Cursor sort of going off in a different direction? Was it like tech related? Was it building other pages or components? Because I'm just curious, like I've heard a lot of people express this, and I'm curious if there's like a pattern in, how it's doing it.
They all seem to make assumptions about where you want to go. And I think that is a
Yeah,
problem. And restraint, bringing that, what do you call it? Reining that in is real important because, yeah, they'll make like your whole project sometimes, like just one thing, you're like, that's not what I wanted. Like,
yeah,
yeah, that's too much. Yeah, he
I think
says,
that's part of the problem with the way AI works because it's supposed to return an answer. So
yeah.
right,
like it's meant to return something. It's not supposed to come back and say I don't know.
right. I know, and that's it's a blessing and a curse, right? Because it just is like, okay, well, I'll just go in a direction and
He said
just
it's David, by the way. It is. He said that
yeah,
in the chat, but he said it was forgetting where his like reusable components were. So it was building new stuff.
yeah,
And that is a problem because I find that a lot. Like you spend a lot of time refactoring. If you don't bring this stuff in early, you're
hmm
spending weeks just refactoring spaghetti code and cleaning it up, which is cool. You have the code, right? But like it's a pain in the ass sometimes to go through and do all that. So, and it's got it.
yeah.
Well,
What have you used it to refactor? By the way, I've tried it. It was
I
pretty
have a
decent.
little bit, yeah.
Yeah, it's done a decent
It's
job. Not perfect, but like,
Yeah, I think you need larger context window models also for refactoring because it has to like look at a lot of different code at once. But
I did it on the one project I was working on. And it didn't have enough context for the whole thing. But what I did was I broke the refact. I said to do the first, like it was basically it was
mm-hmm.
like it was sub routes. So I had a group routes with 5 routes in it. So I had only
Yeah.
refactor the first one, and then I had it apply those changes to the others. That worked well. So like it
Mm.
was like, kind of doing so it could build the components out first, then actually apply them all. Instead
Yeah,
of doing
that
one
makes
now. Yeah.
sense.
So you guys
Yeah.
mentioned spaghetti code and all this stuff, and
Mhm.
I think that's going to be one of the areas where AI is going to kind of excel when it comes to cybersecurity, both finding this stuff and exploiting it, but also potentially
Mm.
fixing it as well. Because
Yeah.
it's always a competition between like the good guys and the bad guys, and whoever can
Mhm.
get there faster. And they both have different reasons for doing it. But with building these really bloated programs, you may accidentally build in backdoors or things like that, or just
Oh, totally.
vulnerabilities
Well,
that
especially if you don't know what's actually happening because you don't know how to
Yeah.
code, right? Like,
Right. You
and back in the day before AI, you would have people manually looking for that stuff, but you know how long that takes to look for manually. But nowadays with
oh God,
AI, you
yeah.
can just have scanners going out there and scanning every web repository looking for any type of
you know,
exploits available.
it
I
makes
bet
And
sense
there's
too why
patterns
security
in
things
that
were
too.
missed. Yeah, well, it makes sense why they're missed too, because back in the day when you had to read through all that, dude, it's hard to
Yeah.
find stuff sometimes. There's just so much information, right? And you just get tired looking at it.
you remember how much
Yeah.
time you spend looking for one like one
Yeah.
bracket, one
Right.
misplaced
Semicolon or
Gone.
bracket?
bracket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gone are
You
the
know, it's
days, thank
funny.
God.
You made me just remember something that I saw the other day. I've been seeing a lot of these posts on LinkedIn where people are changing their I mean, this is so relevant to our topic today. People are changing their title or like job title on LinkedIn to vibe code cleanup specialist. So they're like basically like I'm a specialist in cleaning up your crap code that
Yeah.
you vibe coded. And it makes tons of sense, right? Because it's like so many people are doing this where they're just putting out an MVP or a prototype into production, and they just spent a weekend building it with Cursor, and they have zero experience with technical stuff. I mean,
Or zero
I
knowledge
think,
of how it actually works. That's the other problem, I think,
yeah,
is like, there's no reason for it because you can have it explain how everything works and you can understand it, but it's just not taking the
yeah.
time because we're impatient?
I mean, I think also, you can do security scans with
Yeah.
AI too. I think it might be interesting because I would be willing to bet that there are patterns of exploits in different models and with like Cursor or even like, these other tools like Lovable and Replit and whatever, where they continuously make the same exploits available because
Well,
they're
you've
trained on the
noticed
same data.
I was gonna say, I don't know if you've noticed, but I definitely have like when you use different things, whether it's like Bolt or V0 or Cursor and specific models, you do get a tendency to see patterns in the results, like the UI design,
Totally.
in the
Yeah.
how they decide to design the back end, stuff like that. So
Hmm.
like, yeah, it totally makes sense that you'll see common exploits probably tied to certain models and stuff because that's just how they, were coding. If you don't have any sort of guidelines, it's just gonna go with what it does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
We may see that in the future where like nowadays it'll say like if you're using this software version, whatever, you need to update. Soon it'll be like if you coded with Replit this version, you need to update.
Yeah.
If you're using this version of vibe codes,
Yeah.
vibes. Yeah, that's hilarious. I mean, it's totally true. It's very interesting. Like when I did this video with Chris the other day about vibe coding versus context engineering, at the very end, he asked me a question. He's like, "What do you think, you know, vibe coding is going to look like in like a year to 3 years from now?" And I was almost like stumped. I was like, I honestly don't know. Like I'm excited to see how vibe coding brings non-technical people into software because I think just software in general is like one of the most amazing advances in humans in the past, I don't know,
Dude,
century or
we'll see
more,
new
right?
ideas that were never made before. And I think we'll see because like because developing software was hard, you had big companies that dominated. So you had one size fits all solutions to
Hmm.
everything. I think we're gonna see a lot of more like niche solutions and just unique stuff because it's now open, which is cool. I am excited about
Yeah.
that.
So I'm curious actually what you guys think. Like I know you sort of just answered that, but like if you were to say like maybe 1 to 3 or maybe 5 years out from now, what will software development look like? Because
I
You-
I
So,
had a slightly different answer too, but
well,
I'm curious what you guys say.
what's interesting is like a year ago now is probably when vibe coding really started
yeah,
becoming a thing. And we
Dude,
were
not
like,
not
even.
even, dude. It's been like
not
Not
six,
even.
7 months.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, but like
It's
when AI
crazy.
started to become a thing.
yeah.
And so we were
Yeah.
talking with all our students then who would be like, should I use AI while I'm coding? And it's like, yeah, you can use it to learn, but like try not to let it write all the code for you. But
Well,
nowadays
back
it's
then it
just
wasn't
like
great,
go,
right? Yeah,
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Hmm.
Yeah, I
Any
wonder
other,
that.
because I want to share, but I want to get
Okay.
your like
Oh,
ideas before I share the other thing
Yeah,
that I
I just-
had mentioned to him.
I get what Danny's saying, where there'll be a lot more independent type of stuff, but I have a feeling it's just going to be a lot more independence going to work for big companies because the big
probably. Yeah.
companies who have the money and they're basically going to be recruiting vibe coders, and you're just going to need to prove that you can actually do stuff with vibe coding. So
I,
like,
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
I think that's true. I think, and
Uh,
it's going to show you, like, I think it's going to require people to learn the actual architecture and how to design software, not so much how to code it, but understand how to design it, what it, how it looks, how it's going to connect together, what the goals are, thinking future, thinking with updates and stuff. But I do think we're going to see a lot of like also this like little stuff being made because it's now all of a sudden possible. Like, because it was
mhm.
a high bar of entry before, like really high. And frustrating too, I mean, we all talked about that, like back when we could have started when we were younger in the 90s, none of us did because it was such a pain because there was no information. It was hard to look things up. Now it's like
Yeah.
infinitely easier. So yeah, I'm curious to see where it goes. I mean, if these models keep getting better too, I think we'll see it could change dramatically. It really depends on how they go. If the models improve a lot, because they're at a good place now, but if they can increase like another 50% in terms of like execution and like design and stuff, it could get really interesting, I think.
so now inquiring
Yeah.
minds want to know, what did you
Yeah.
say, Russ?
So, uh, yeah, so I said a bunch of that stuff, but then I tried to think a little bit further out. And one of the things that came to my mind was, there may be a point in time where like we just strip away all the layers of like simplicity or complexity, however you want to see it, and we can just vibe code directly to like binary,
Yeah, it's
right?
possible.
So like
Yeah.
basically you could just be like cursor, write this, and it would just write binary or so, I for websites, I don't know if it would, if that would even be possible. Like we're dependent on browsers. So like part of my mind went there. I mean, like you start thinking about how right now we have like all of these advanced sort of quote unquote advanced technologies like AI, robotics. We're doing like sort of like cyborg, like human robot integration. So like, but they're sort of scattered, right? They're fractured. So like you start thinking about like 3 to 5 years from
Bringing that
now,
all together.
these things all come together where it's like
Yeah.
you can have
You can vibe code your
a
own sex bot.
Yeah.
basically
Well, dude,
that's it. We're going straight to idiocracy is
well,
basically
yeah,
what we're getting
you
at.
know, that's the other interesting thing is like a side of software that people do often forget about is like in a lot of research and stuff, like you have academics and stuff, researchers building like really sloppy code, but just to get stuff done. Now that's
Sure.
you don't need to anymore, right? You
Shoot.
have
No.
cursors and you have all these AI tools, so you can make like crazy stuff very easily. So I think we're going to see a lot of change in that
Yeah.
area too, where like who knows? I mean, yeah, it's really open, and I think that's why you just have to keep trying and keep experimenting because you never know really what's going to work really well, and then it changes too when these models change as well, which is kind of insane.
Yeah, absolutely. So I like part of my mind went there where it's like we get so advanced that all this stuff integrates together and you know, I don't know, it's going into like Terminator sort of realm.
You code a robot to build you a thing to then do this.
Yeah. But then at the same time I was saying that, I also thought about like legacy code and how the government still runs on like COBOL and like all these
Yeah,
like old like Fortran and stuff. And so then I started thinking about it and I was like, yeah, AI might get great, but like everything out there right now is built on like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, like all these older technologies, like even like WordPress is built on like PHP, right? And so
yeah,
you still need somebody or something to understand those codes,
That'll be interesting
right?
though, is if these get good enough where you can take these things and go back to these old outdated systems and update them with automatically. Like
Like
do it, yeah,
automatically.
without
Yeah.
doing any person work, just kind of let it do its
Yeah.
thing. That'd be cool.
It's kind of crazy to think about because it leads to all this potential for vulnerabilities too, right? Like again, I think the biggest drawback or the biggest like issue with AI in general is context, right? Is like these assumptions and the hallucinations that come out of it. So you imagine you take a legacy system like running on Fortran or COBOL, and you're like, hey, just update this to like C or whatever, right? There's still this like
Well,
this inherent vagueness that it has to make decisions on. And so
the problem with
until
context too is at a point, right? It requires so much processing power to be able to maintain all of that. And I do wonder if like in the future too, maybe we'll get like specialty systems that have like insane contexts specifically for, let's say,
yeah,
something like that, like where it's running in the cloud, where it has a lot of processing power, it can do it, you know. But yeah,
I think we will. I mean, based on what it looks like governments are investing in these gigantic data centers,
yeah.
um, we're going to get to a point where the processing power you have at your disposal is almost limitless. Like it's kind of crazy when you think about like what you were saying like a
Have you
year ago. It really hasn't even been because I remember like
it was
I went
March that
to
we started using it, dudes. And
yeah,
that
like
was when
I
it was
went I
early,
went to
like
React Miami in April, and I've been using Cursor for maybe like a month or two before that. That's like when it first started becoming like good, where people were actually using it, the hype was there. And so that's not even a year ago. And so you think like 3 to 5 years out from now, the landscape is going to be so incredibly different where like,
well, you know,
you can plug into Neuralink and
yeah.
just think what you want. Like imagine the UI that you want and it just shows up on the screen. Like
Well, I
that
mean,
that's a reality.
yeah, the future's got quantum computers are gonna come out eventually. And even just I was thinking about that too in the last year, dude, the processing power and graphics cards and stuff has skyrocketed and processors. They
Hmm.
all made huge leaps, and that's why these data centers have gotten so much more powerful too. So yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
think there's really no limit. It's just a matter of what we do with it. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. So all that to say, Uh, does AI change what it means to be a dev? I think definitely. I mean, we're already seeing that CEOs of huge companies. I mean, we were talking about this, Chris and I were talking about this, like Coinbase, I think CEO came out and was like, if you don't adopt AI, like you're fired, basically, like you have no role in our company. And many other like
Yeah, but
Shopify
why
and
not though? Because like really, you're just
yeah,
limiting yourself. You're making yourself slower, less efficient. I
yeah.
mean, it really is kind of ridiculous.
But but I also think it's important to not just like adopt AI blindly, right? Like
No.
I was reading this thing about Google and how the way that Google employees use AI is very different from how um, a lot of other people quote unquote vibe code, where they are not just going into Cursor and like being like, hey, let's add some feature, right?
No.
They're workshopping and building documentation and building structure and understanding exactly the problem, the feature they're building, and then going and just letting basically AI do the heavy lifting. And I think that's
And then
really,
going back over it too and refining. I mean, I think that's the
yes.
other thing is refining it and stuff too. And that's where like straight vibe coding people are going to lose out because they don't have that knowledge to be able to do that. And so you're always going to have issues too
Yeah.
later. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I also think AI changes what it means for imposter syndrome and feeling left behind. Because
Yeah.
never before has it seemed like stuff is moving so
Mm,
fast and there's so many new technologies. And so nowadays it's one of those things where you need to kind of step back from AI in order to be able to recognize that AI encoding isn't everything. There's also a
Yeah.
reality as well to interact with.
Yeah. It's easy to get sucked in. It
yeah.
is. There's so many things coming out so often. It's like you can spend all day just trying things without ever doing anything. It's insane. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a double-edged sword too. I mean, I spoke to somebody the
Really.
other day who was like, I told them I was a software developer, and like the first word out of their mouth was like, I hate AI. Like the first thing they said.
Well,
And
Nice.
and I was like, I get it. I totally get it, because it is one of those things where like you start to lose touch with reality of like we exist as humans in a world and nature, right? And
It
we
can also
think
make
like
us feel useless. Do you know what I mean? Like it almost can make the
totally,
person feel
yeah,
like, well, what's the point of me being here? If this thing can do all that, like,
yeah,
why bother? Yeah,
yeah.
it
And
can
I
be
think,
much.
we start, if you yeah, like if you adopt AI too much, you start just diverting to it instead of using your own brain. Like, for simple things. And then like we get to a point where, we lose problem solving skills and critical thinking skills and things like that, because we're just like, hey, ChatGPT. Like I find myself doing it
Well,
sometimes
that's
where
a
I'm
big
like,
worry in education right now too, is that kids are adopting it so much that like they're not going to be able to think for themselves
yeah,
to be creative, right? Because AI is not
dude,
creative. It's requires a person to input, right, to do something, right? So that is the fear. And like you said, right, just going to Google or Gemini or whatever for everything, you lose your ability to write, to think, to kind of come up with stuff on your own.
yeah. And it's the data is already there. If you look at like ChatGPT usage over the course of a year between September and like what is it, like May, it gets like double or triple the amount of usage. And it's just because it's school,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that's most of it's just school, which I think, again, double-edged sword, great resource for learning. Like I remember when I was in school, and probably when you guys were in school, anytime that you wanted to like source something, your teachers would be like, you can't use Wikipedia. That's like the worst thing. Well, guess what? ChatGPT is mostly trained on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
And Reddit.
Wikipedia
So
Wikipedia's gotten a lot
yeah,
better too, but
literally.
it's like everything else, right? Wikipedia's gotten a lot better over the years too. Because originally it was like a little bit but
Hmm.
it's gotten a lot better. But it is
Yeah,
interesting too, because I think it's a great, I think all people have to keep in mind is it's a great tool. You can use it as a tool, but don't let it do everything and don't rely on it. Because I think that's where we're always going to run into problems. If we just let
yeah,
it do everything, or like with vibe coding, right? If you're just developing without thinking yourself, you're never going to get the results you really want. You have to put
yeah,
effort in
totally.
still. It's just the effort's put in a different place now. It's put more in the design, architecture, context building, prompt building, rather than the actual coding, which is nice. It speeds things up and it makes us capable of doing almost anything.
Yeah. So with that, I think we've all come to the conclusion that if you want to become a developer and get hired and build stuff, you're going to have to adopt AI, right? Would you guys agree?
Yeah, no choice
I think
now.
so. Yeah, you really have no choice at this point. So absolutely go out there and try, right? Like there's no, this is one thing that we've said over and over again, but like if you want to become a developer, you have to be willing to take the risk to break things, be wrong sometimes, and just learn. And so AI is one of the best ways to do that, because it is really good at just writing codes. You can learn really
Dude,
fast.
and
You can break stuff really fast, and
you
you
can
can
break
fix it.
stuff and make new projects over and over. That's the thing I do like, is you
Yeah.
can iterate stuff. No, it like doesn't matter. It's like, trash it, start again. Who cares? Because it takes, no time to get back to where you were, so it's not a big deal, not a loss. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. So,
nice.
with that, thank you guys for hanging out today. As we do every Saturday, or most Saturdays, we're trying to do them every Saturday. But the past few we were pretty busy. So, if you guys want to hang out with us after this call in person on this Zoom call with us, you can do so. Just head over to CodeNoobs.io and sign up to be part of our inner circle. And then you can chat with us throughout the week through our private Telegram channel, and also hang out with us on our live call after this with the whole group. And if you are watching and you're going to be there today, we'll see you in about 15 minutes or so. And yeah, we'll hang out and talk a little bit about what everyone's been up to, what we're doing, and if you guys need some help or have questions, we're there for you. So yeah, with that,
Sweet.
thanks for tuning in again. Thank you, Randall and Danny, for hanging out.